Welcome back. In a moment we'll talk more about augmented reality, but first here are some other stories to keep an eye on. The gunman suspected of carrying out the Turkey nightclub shootings was trained in Afghanistan. Istanbul's city governors issued a statement saying Abdul Kadir Masharipov has been detained by police and is said to have confessed to the New Year's Eve killings where 39 people lost their lives. Daesh have claimed responsibility. New 500 Bolivar notes are now being circulated in Venezuela amidst a deepening inflation crisis. The new bill's been introduced to simplify the country's economy. The now withdrawn 100 Bolivar note, once Venezuela's largest bill, was worth just 3 US cents. And Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg has been asked to testify in a $2 billion lawsuit. It's claimed the social media entrepreneur stole technology from a startup company. Facebook bought the virtual reality system Oculus Rift in 2014. Game maker ZeniMax argued that their early innovations were unlawfully copied. Let's return now to augmented reality, and let's discuss all this with Kate Bevan, who's a journalist who specialises in technology and social media. And also with us is Alistair Charlton, who is senior reporter with the International Business Times, who focuses on consumer technology and motoring. And I can say they are both really here. They are not holograms, they are human beings. Alistair, welcome to you. You went to CES in Las Vegas.
Yes.
Was this AR technology on show there?
To an extent, yes, it was. I think one of the highlights for me was from Panasonic. They had a system where they were projecting AR onto the screen of a box in a football stadium. So you could see the game through the glass, but also the score, the time, and replays and other highlights projected onto the glass. And of course, you could serve adverts on there as well.
Here's the trick question, I think, to all this. A good experience? It added something to the game, or just a bit of a gimmick that got in the way?
I think it really added to it. I think it has the potential to anyway. AR and VR, I think, are dismissed as gimmicks sometimes, but in that application, I think it was pretty good.
Because that added value test is crucial, isn't it?
I think so, very much so. That's a really good example, actually, of how a heads-up display, a HUD, can really add something to it. I mean, we've seen sort of, movies where somebody firing a drone at somebody a million miles away has a HUD display on, and you get that kind of augmented stuff there. But this is actually the real-world stuff we're really going to see. It's going to be sports. It's going to be, driving your car. It's that kind of thing. It's going to be games. I mean, Pokemon Go was the first example of it that really took off. And this, I think, is a really interesting area of technology, much more interesting and much more likely to take off, I think, than VR, actually.
Why do you think that?
Well,
of the two technologies, that AR might survive or thrive better?
Well, there's much higher barriers to entry with VR. You've got to faff about strapping something to your face. You've got to have the right phone. The battery dies very quickly. I mean, there's a whole issue with battery tech there with VR. And I think crucially as well, all our paradigms are built around sharing, and yet VR is an isolating experience, whereas you can do the sharing. That football match is a classic shared experience, enhanced by something the technology can give you.
So the hints are there, aren't there? Microsoft's already talked about their HoloLens, which is, I think, a translucent display, isn't it? And as Chloe was reporting earlier, the suggestion that Apple might have something up their sleeve. Do you put much store by that rumour?
Tim Cook has said a few times now that he's more interested in AR than VR. He says there are more opportunities for it and it'll be much larger in the long term. I think companies have to be very careful not to oversell and underdeliver with AR. We saw Google Glass was sort of half-launched as a consumer product for £1,000 and it never really looked as good as
Well, they sort of said join the experiment, didn't they? But did they charge the experimenters a lot of money to do it?
They did.
Why do you think they killed that off so soon?
I think selling it to the consumers was probably the wrong move, and that they saw that it's much better placed in enterprise, in business, in less interesting, less glamorous areas for consumers, but for the business, it probably makes more sense.
One area I think, Kate, that might be really useful is the sort of how-to, the knowledge. We saw a hint of the medical expertise there. I mean, it's extraordinary to be able to think you might be able to approach an operation almost as an amateur, because you'd be able to show...
I really hope we're not going to be approaching operations. This is somewhere I'm quite keen on experts.
You could learn... Well, all right, let's take it out of the medical profession, but you could fix a car or something like that, because you can be shown what to do.
Yes, and actually, how-to videos on YouTube are a really big thing. So that's actually a really interesting and I think strong potential, you know, particularly if we project it into something you already own, because again, this is the thing, it's the barriers to entry is the key thing. Do you have to buy something else? Does it cost you money? Do you have to set it up? Or is it something that you can maybe clip onto the side of your glasses if you're a glasses wearer, that you can just do, or just project on top of something? If it's easy to use and it has a real facility, a real use, then I think it's going to happen. It's the stuff that is full of good ideas but is too expensive, too clunky, too fiddly, and you start to feel sometimes, particularly with things like VR and also with wearables, that this is manufacturers trying to sell you something because they need a new hardware category.
Yes, and therefore the expectations, or controlling expectations, needs to be done quite carefully. I mean, the science fiction world of the movies, of course, have had a contact lens where the hero, or the villain for that matter, can see all sorts of data. And Barish Mitra was saying he thinks it could happen, but probably what, 5 years out, 10 years out? What does your hunch tell you?
I think it's quite a lot further than that, to be honest, to get the technology so small. I think we've sort of 10 years of the iPhone a couple of days ago, and fundamentally a smartphone hasn't changed that much. And now we're putting it into VR headsets, and we're exploring more with it there, but it's still, like you say, big and clunky.
So probably the phone, the personal screen, is going to be the first iteration of this on the way.
Yes, because we've already got
them.
Got it. I mean,
and the computing power is there, Kate, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, I keep coming back to this, the barriers to entry thing, and also the friction point. The easier it is to use, the more it'll be taken up. I mean, I think we've seen that with AI assistants. You know, I've got a couple of Alexas at home. Yeah, other people have got them. This is
where you can talk to a computer
and
rather than
easy.
type.
It's intuitive. Rather than get my phone out to look at the time, I now say, Alexa, what's the time? So that's a really frictionless, easy, low barriers to entry thing. And I think this applies equally to AR to VR. So with AR, we already have the technology with us. It's just a case of providers adding it on top of it.
And we have had for a while, haven't we? Some of the mapping systems will use your phone's camera and AR to, if you need to go and find an ATM, you can show it a picture of a high street and it'll actually point you to where the nearest bank with a working, well, I don't know if it's a working or not, but it's got an ATM anyway. That sort of thing's quite useful, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that side of AR is, like you say, there's no barrier to entry, that everyone's got a phone with a camera and a screen. And I think that's all well and good. It's the AR where we're trying to, project into our eyes, where that's still quite a long way from becoming.
Shopping experience, commerce? Do you think it has a value there?
I think big potential both for AR and VR. Going to a store and...
I'm not going to walk around Waitrose with a VR headset on my face, so...
No, but you could wear it at home. You'd wear it at home and do your shopping at home, and with AR you could see how a product would look in your house before you buy it.
That's what, and also just the sense of being able to walk around, maybe even in the supermarket and see the sell-by date or something, having to pick it up. I think what these things are doing are reducing even further the friction to things. I mean, actually, it's not that hard to go shopping or to click through a shopping list on Amazon or Waitrose or whatever. But again, reducing the friction, making it even easier to use is absolute key for vendors here.
But there's some interesting lessons to be learnt, isn't there, that technologists mustn't race too far ahead. I mean, you talked about the audio assistant you can speak to, but getting a computer to turn the lights on and off is a dubious proposition when actually it's really easy to press a switch, isn't it?
But if you're lying in bed and you want to turn all the lights off in the house, I mean, I've got some smart home stuff at the moment. I can lie in bed and turn the lights off and turn the kettle on in the morning from my bed, but I've got to fire up an app to do it.
Yeah.
If I could just go, turn the lights off, put the house to bed, then, again, it's this easy. If it's easy, it has to be easy to set up as well as easy to use. So there are two ease of use things there. But if it's easy, then people will do it.
So maybe a combination of the two will come in, will it? With the ability to use the spoken voice as a command system, and then the feedback loop is actually much more visual, or even start the feedback with using the screen instead. That may be crucial to whether this catches on or not.
Absolutely. I think I'm having I'm having images of the Jarvis system with Iron Man. His talk to it, and it's all AR, wasn't it?
But also, all science fiction is, you talk to the house and it'll drop down a kind of virtual screen in front of you where you can see where your kids are or see where the villain is. I actually think that's possible. Maybe not immediately, but maybe in the next 10 or 20 years, we might have that in our houses. I think it's very cool.
Because in erring caution, we then have to reflect on the Pokemon Go phenomenon, which went from zero to absolute hero in a ridiculously short space of time, because I suppose it was very easy to get, wasn't it? People understood what they were taking on.
Yeah, and this goes back to, there are other concerns as well. There's privacy. Blip Up, which you were talking about earlier, ran into issues of people not wondering about how the data from identifying people could be used. So there are privacy concerns, there are data collection concerns about this stuff. So, you know, it's not an unalloyed, halcyon lit upland of the future, but it is a really interesting technology that's going to come more and more into our lives, I think.
And this year could be it. I mean, they said 2016 was the big VR year, which, whether it was or not, I suppose, we'll let historians decide. But do you think we're going to see a lot more of this during this calendar year?
We could do. I think, obviously, Pokemon Go is the perfect example of how immediately successful that can be in a very simple game.
But the attention span is really short.
Yes,
and
I think
one of the things for vendors to be aware
I think
of.
the weather.
They didn't have the
killed it.
second phase ready, did they, really? So the next game for us to play, I suppose.
Yeah, and it kind of went away again. So, you know, it's there to be taken, but you have to do it right.
Alistair and Kate, thank you both very much indeed. Now, we end with our Insight Bite, a little something that we feel you should know, except today, the something is not little at all. Passers-by look like they've bitten off more than they can chew as they come face to face with the jaws of death. Unperturbed, Humpback the alligator looks ready for his close-up as he takes a leisurely stroll in a wildlife reserve in Lakeland in Florida. The viral video has been shared on social media tens of thousands of times, not only to look at the gigantic size of the gator, he's apparently 3.5 meters long, but also in admiration of the brave, some might call them stupid, tourists for getting so close. So we'll see you later, alligator. That's all for now. I'm Martin Stanford. That was Insight.